Tonight, the U.S. Supreme Court dismantles a half-century of abortion rights law.
It's not the country I went to sleep in last night.
Each of that country's states now in control. A woman's ability to choose now depending on where she lives. In a divided country, anger for personal loss.
This is men-dominated women. We're going to continue fighting.
Set against joy for a political win.
I have just been so excited for this.
Delivered by a court with the votes for radical change.
The court has taken something away that's so fundamental.
The ruling, the reaction, and a possible role for Canada. This is The National. And this is the scene outside the U.S. Supreme Court tonight. Protesters gathered there as they have been all day since the ruling was announced. Good evening, I'm Ian Hannah-Mansing. After a draft leaked in May, the U.S. Supreme Court's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade wasn't a surprise, but that might be the only emotion missing today. For 50 years, that ruling protected abortion rights in the United States, but not anymore. Instantly, abortions were banned or restricted in some states, with more to follow. For some Americans, this is a long-awaited win. For others, a terrifying loss. Besides curtailing women's rights now, they fear this decision could lay the groundwork for more changes to come. Susan Ormiston takes us into the crowd that surged to the courthouse today.
My body, my choice. My body, my choice.
Fury outside the Supreme Court
My choice.
as American women lose the constitutional protection to get an abortion.
This is men-dominated women as they have for centuries. But as we have for centuries, we're going to continue fighting. We will fight this. We'll see their ass in court.
The landmark decision to overturn Roe v. Wade after 50 years
What do you mean it doesn't matter?
splits the country and plunges it into a new era of rancor and division over women's rights.
We need your help, Canada. And we really need y'all. This is not right. It's not the country we know. It's not the country I went to sleep in last night. I'm really afraid for women's rights. And I'm really sad for my country. I love my country so much, and I'm just so embarrassed.
Pro-choice, that's the law. Babies never choose to die.
But it is a stunning victory for anti-abortion groups who fought for decades to give individual states the power to ban abortion while attracting a new generation.
I work for Students for Life, and we've been here for every single possible decision day so far. And it was today we got to be here the moment that Roe v. Wade was overturned. I have just been so excited for this, and we're finally in a post-Roe America.
In a majority decision, Justice Samuel Alito wrote that Roe was egregiously wrong, and its reasoning was exceptionally weak. The ruling means the U.S. map will likely split, with soon 25 states prohibiting or banning abortion and 25 others allowing access, including 9 states which extended abortion rights anticipating the Supreme Court decision.
The U.S. Attorney General says the Justice Department will work tirelessly to advance reproductive freedom. But people in this crowd are worried about the decision's impact on other rights, like contraception, even same-sex marriage.
I think all kinds of rights are threatened, and I think anyone who thinks contraception isn't next is not paying attention.
The ruling is a win for conservatives and the Christian rights influence on the court and in politics.
You know, today's Supreme Court decision in Dobbs is the most important pro-life ruling in American history.
This is a sad day for the country, in my view. But it doesn't mean the fight's over.
Come on and join the fight.
More like the fight's just started again.
Susan, this was a split decision, 3 justices dissenting, and take us through their message today.
Yeah, it was a blistering dissent by those 3 liberal judges, calling this decision catastrophic, saying it undermines the credibility of this court. They said the majority always despised the Roe ruling and now had the votes to overturn it, and that's why they did it. They ended their written dissent, Ian, saying, with sorrow for this court and for the millions of women who tonight have lost a fundamental right.
Thanks, Susan. U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris today called on Americans to react with their votes in the upcoming midterm elections, saying the court's decision has sparked a crisis.
This is a healthcare crisis. Because understand, Millions of women in America will go to bed tonight without access to the health care and reproductive care that they had this morning, without access to the same health care or reproductive health care that their mothers and grandmothers had for 50 years.
Among world leaders reacting today, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, he called the news horrific and vowed to defend access to abortion in Canada.
But today, I think of those generations of women around the world, and specifically in the United States, who fought so hard to gain rights and are facing this devastating setback. It shows how much standing up and fighting for rights matters every day, that we can't take anything for granted.
After today's ruling, the Canadian government said talks are underway about how best to support American women who may be looking to come to Canada for a safe abortion. Belle Puri looks at the potential impacts on them and on Canada's healthcare system.
Canada has long promised that clinics will be open for American women who want an abortion.
We've had conversations about what it could look like for Canada to support American women in need, and I know those conversations are ongoing.
Those who cross the border for reproductive services will pay out of pocket or through their own insurance.
Some of the added barriers to get to Canada would be things like a passport, potentially longer stays, and navigating a healthcare system that isn't the one that they're used to. So it's a big unknown.
60% of the people that seek abortions are people that already have children.
It's hard to say how many Americans might come to Canada for abortions.
Coming to Canada would be their only way out of not being criminalized for health care.
But some provinces will likely see more than others.
Especially in the prairie provinces, they are bordering with states whose trigger laws that are in place may make it a crime to get an abortion as of today.
In some urban areas, Canadian patients don't usually have a long wait for an abortion appointment. But what happens if Americans begin to access the healthcare system?
But even a small number of Americans coming up could overwhelm our health systems. And yes, we're concerned. Currently, we don't have the capacity or the access to accommodate Americans, at least not very many of them.
Right now in BC, very few Americans look to Canada for abortions.
It's not super common. I would say that our clinics and our sex sense line field calls, maybe 5 or 6 times.
15. Yeah.
The changes will be up to Americans to decide if it makes more sense to seek an abortion in states that still allow it or come to Canada. Belle Puri, CBC News, Vancouver.
Let's head to Chris Reyes in New York now, where people have taken to the streets. And Chris, tell us what's happening there.
Well, Ian, I'm in the middle of an energized crowd here in downtown Manhattan that's been going since 5 o'clock this afternoon. Hundreds more marching the streets. We joined that crowd as well.
Whose body? Our body! Whose body? Our body!
In the chants,
abortion is my right!
On the signs, a resounding rejection of the Supreme Court ruling from the streets of New York.
I wasn't planning on doing this today. I got all my work stuff, but I'm so angry.
The Supreme Court is illegitimate!
Hundreds marched in Manhattan, stopping traffic during rush hour. Everyone in the crowd standing up for abortion rights, some with very personal reasons for showing up.
I know that this will affect working class black women and people more than anybody else.
We've got to show up.
This man joined his wife and daughters.
This is absolutely a human rights issue, and we need more men to show up. Everybody's got to be here. This is our issue.
This rally in Denver.
Hands off our bodies!
This one in Louisville. Just a few of many demonstrations happening across the U.S., with more planned over the weekend.
What you have done and what you have prayed for is to make death for women easier, because you don't allow them access to good medical care.
In Georgia, where new abortion restrictions will soon take effect, some celebrated the ruling.
Well, I just think personally that nobody should have an abortion.
And that's all I'm going to say.
With this decision,
Abortion rights advocates are now pleading for support.
these barriers will only be more widespread and felt, especially by those who can't afford or do not have the ability to cross state lines.
Who will legalize?
Prominent women's rights lawyer Gloria Allred urged women not to lose hope.
This is a war on women and girls. We must not underestimate the impact of this. Our daughters' lives are at risk, and we have to fight back.
My body, my business!
A message clearly received at this rally and others across the country.
People today, you've heard a lot of people. What stood out for you?
Well, Ian, the first thing that you sense in this crowd is that the emotion is visceral. They're not just angry, they're disgusted. I saw a woman in tears. Right beside me, there's a woman on the ground in protest. She's covered in red paint and hangers. I saw another woman, again, very emotional. But there's also a lot of organizing happening here, sharing of resources, of abortion services. And one thing is clear, Ian, that this is a protest not just for tonight, that many here are prepared to fight for the long haul.
Thanks, Chris. The concern about a possible uptick in the U.S. demand for abortions in Canada underlines a major issue in this country. While there are no Canadian laws restricting abortion, access is the issue in some regions. As Julie Wong explains, not all Canadian women who want an abortion can get one.
This Winnipeg clinic is one of just 3 where clients can access surgical abortions in Manitoba.
We are funded to provide 1,600 by the province per year, but in reality, we actually provide about anywhere between 2,000 to 2,400 in a year.
Kemlyn Nemhard says she's also concerned for clients the clinic cannot help.
If you live in an urban center, you probably have fairly good access. If you live anywhere outside of an urban center in this country, access is not equal.
That inequity worries abortion care nurses like Martha Painter.
We already have issues in Canada that, despite complete decriminalization, geography is our biggest hurdle.
In New Brunswick, the only private abortion clinic shut down 8 years ago. Abortions there can now only be accessed in 2 cities.
In our view, there's no legal or constitutional justification for that restriction.
The Canadian Civil Liberties Association is taking the province to court.
A good portion of the province is without accessible reproductive care.
Meeting people's needs is really, really important.
The problem of unequal access compelled Autumn Reinhardt-Simpson to start the Alberta Abortion Access Network.
If they need to come to the city, that's a whole other set of barriers. It could be that they don't have money, they don't have transportation, they need to take time off work.
While the U.S. ruling does not change Canadian law, there are concerns about what Canadians might hear or read.
We might see a rise in disinformation about abortion services, abortion access, and so wanting to make sure that people are clear that you have a right to abortion in this country and that it is a stigma-free choice.
While the key goal among pro-choice advocates is to get more access for women who need care. Julia Wong, CBC News, Edmonton.
We'll have more ahead on the U.S. ruling, including reaction from around the world, with pro-choice advocates bracing for potential ripple effects.
To see that in 2022, women and girls still have to, fight this battle. And the thought of what that would mean for women like me here is quite worrying.
Coming up, the fears in some countries that the U.S. ruling could embolden abortion opponents. The United States Congress has passed a bipartisan gun control bill.
Let's talk about ripple effects, because the Supreme Court's decision on abortion could really open the door to overturn other major rulings going forward. Justice Clarence Thomas now calling for the Supreme Court to revisit issues surrounding contraception and access and marriage equality. In his concurring opinion, Justice Thomas said, quote, "We should reconsider all of this court's due process precedents, including Griswold, Lawrence, and Obergefell. Those are major cases that helped shape America as we know it. Griswold v. Connecticut established a married couple's right to use contraception without government interference. That happened back in 1965. Lawrence versus Texas established the right to engage in private sexual acts in 2003. Obergefell versus Hodges established the right for same-sex couples to marry over in 2015. Now, Justice Thomas's words confirmed what many progressive lawmakers and advocates have feared for many years.
Opponents of abortion rights say the court did the right thing.
KCAL 9's Rena Nakano live in Chino with that part of the story. Rena?
Hey guys, yeah, I spoke with Pastor Hibbs. He told me earlier that he believes life starts at conception, and to deny that, he believes, is unethical. While many Americans are protesting the decision made in the Supreme Court Friday morning, Jack Hibbs is quietly celebrating.
I think it's a great step in the right direction.
The founding pastor of Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills, says the overturn of Roe v. Wade is a personal victory.
Finding out when I was a young teenager that my mom attempted an abortion, I survived that. Has just caused me to love life more.
Despite the landmark decision, access to abortion in California will continue to be protected. These rights will likely be expanded soon by state Democrats.
Listen, wars are not won in a day.
There's also California Constitutional Amendment 10, which would prohibit the state from denying a person's access to reproductive freedom. It cleared the Senate this week and will likely be on the November ballot. But the pro-life pastor and his 15,000-person congregation believe the tide is turning.
It's hard to turn a big ship, California being the ship, but it's turning.
He also shares his own family story with adoption.
She's 12 years old. She's an amazing piano player.
Emmeline's biological mother was penniless and pregnant when she met the Hibbs family. One thing led to another, and Emmeline ended up being adopted by his daughter, Rebecca. Now they can't imagine a life without her.
We saw her from her birth, and we've had her in our life ever since.
He believes adoption is and can be the best option for those having to face abortion in the future.
Exterminating that life is just too much. I think if she had options and choices, that she would respond to that.
One of those options and choices could have been abortion.
It could be abortion, but abortion weighs on your conscience.
And he also told me that he believes that we as a society should make the process of adoption much easier so that people who want that family don't have that major cost or that long and frustrating wait. I'm Rena Nakano here in Chino. I'll send it back to you.
Rena, thank you.
Texas is one of 26 states that have or say they will ban abortion, but WFAA's Jason Wheeler is here now to show us the places where abortion is still legal.
Yeah, you know, Cynthia, a lot of those places that have already banned abortion, those are because of trigger laws. Those are denoted here in these darker shades that include Texas. Basically, they had laws on the books that were ready to go and immediately make abortion illegal in a lot of cases as soon as the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade. And so you see here, as far as neighboring states go anyway, in this darker shade of purple, Colorado and New Mexico, abortions are still allowed there after 22 weeks, in fact. It is not expected to change, and you know, with today's decision by the Supreme Court. Then you see Kansas here in this lighter shade of purple. That's an interesting case there. Abortions there are still allowed up to 22 weeks, but big asterisk here. Kansas, by the way, Wichita, Kansas would be the closest that a woman from DFW would be able to go find abortion care. But I say that one comes with a big asterisk because August 2nd, voters in Kansas are going to go to the polls to decide whether to take away any protection for abortion in the state constitution there. So that could be changing. That is one of those states where we might see a difference being made. But again, right now, that's the closest drive, at least 6 hours away. I want to bring you to this map now from the Texas Tribune where we will close here, because let's say that if Kansas does get taken off the map, then the closest two places, again, New Mexico and Colorado, where you see 7 clinics and 17 clinics. Already, a lot of these neighboring states have been seeing an influx of Texas patients over the past 9 months because Texas put big new restrictions on abortions here last September. We're going to get into those numbers. How many Texas women have already been going to neighboring states for abortion procedures? We're going to talk about that in just a little while at 6 o'clock, and it is expected that those numbers are going to go way up after this.
This is the first time ever that a state has asked an originalist Supreme Court or a majority originalist Supreme Court to overturn Roe.
That's right. Right now, we are continuing our team coverage of this landmark decision. Mississippi asking the Supreme Court to do what's never been done, overturning Roe v. Wade. And Zaria Oates joins me with the timeline of how we got to today by detailing this Mississippi case that got it all started. Right, Zaria?
Yeah, that's right, Richard. This comes just 4 years after the state of Mississippi briefly implemented the Gestational Age Act. The law, established March 19th of 2018, would have prohibited abortions in Mississippi after the 15th week of pregnancy. But just hours after then Governor Phil Bryant signed the ban into action, the Center for Reproductive Rights filed Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization in an effort to block what they deemed an unconstitutional ban.
These are taking away women's decisions over their own bodies.
Less than 24 hours later, on March 20th, 2018, a federal district judge granted emergency relief blocking enforcement of the ban. Less than 24 hours later, on March 20th, 2018, a federal district judge granted emergency relief blocking enforcement of the ban. In November 2018, the judge ruled in favor of Jackson Women's Health Organization, stating that the state, quote, chose to pass a law it knew was unconstitutional to endorse a decades-long campaign fueled by national interest groups to ask the Supreme Court to overturn Roe v. Wade. This is Mississippi Governor Tate Reeves in April 2019.
It has been my goal and will continue to be my goal to make Mississippi the safest place in America for an unborn child.
Then, in December 2019, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit affirmed the district court's decision to stop the abortion ban from taking place. But in June 2020, the state of Mississippi filed a petition asking the Supreme Court of the United States to take a stance. SCOTUS announced in May 2021 it would hear the state's appeal of the Fifth Circuit's decision and heard the appeal in December 2021. Flash forward to May 2022, when Politico released that a first draft SCOTUS opinion from February 2022 had been leaked regarding their decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. Now, the decision was made Friday morning to overturn Roe v. Wade, creating a historic precedent for states to have their own rulings on abortion.
All right, and right now we are learning some states are now taking their own initiative to implement anti-abortion laws sooner than the timeline.
Well, you don't have to look far to see the immediate impact of this decision. Doctors in Wisconsin stopped providing abortions today. As WCCO's Ren Clayton reports, that's because a ban from the 1800s is back in effect.
A slow day at this Planned Parenthood in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. A week ago, in preparation for the Supreme Court ruling to overturn Roe v. Wade, Wisconsin Planned Parenthood stopped scheduling abortion services. That took effect today.
Not super happy about it. I'm kind of scared, I guess. I feel like it's a lot of my rights being taken away.
Unlike Minnesota, abortions in Wisconsin have stopped effective immediately. The state now defaults back to the 1849 law banning abortions unless the mother's at risk.
When you go back to an 1849 ruling on an issue that is very much contemporary, that's no good can come from that.
In a statement, Planned Parenthood Wisconsin said they are exploring all legal options. Legal experts we spoke with said any lawsuit would be against the old law, likely if it's too vague. Some Wisconsinites today disagree with the ruling.
If I need to get an abortion at some point for some reason, knowing that I can't do it in the state that I live in, I have to travel somewhere.
Wisconsin's Democratic Governor Tony Evers attempted to repeal the 173-year-old law. That effort failed in the state's legislature. For now, those seeking abortions will look to neighboring states.
Minnesota is more open to this, and so I would expect probably there'd be a little bit of movement over that way.
In Eau Claire, Ren Clayton, WCCO 4 News.
Beyond traveling to Minnesota, women in Wisconsin could also seek abortions in Illinois. The district attorney who oversees the Madison area today said he will not enforce the state's ban.
And I should, you know what, I'm going to welcome you as well if you are just joining us here on CBC News Network. Welcome inside our CBC newsroom. We've got you covered on this breaking news coming from the Supreme Court in the United States overturning Roe v. Wade. There is reaction in Canada, and our Chase team has reached Kemlyn Nemard. She's the executive director of Women's Health Clinic in Winnipeg. Kemlyn, when we talked just before the shot to Nancy Pelosi and the reaction from her, you mentioned you were shocked, you were appalled. What could this mean for Canada if women in the United States cannot have access in many states to an abortion?
Well, okay, we can't know anything for sure,
I'll start there. But one of the things, especially I think here in Winnipeg, I recently saw a map of the states that basically will make it a criminal offense to make it illegal to have an abortion. And they are, like Manitoba itself is kind of surrounded by those states. So we already get women coming to us from the states, like out of province for abortions. I'm really worried that we're going to be deluged with women coming to seek those services here. And we can't, we won't turn anybody away, but we really, as a population that is 1/10 the size of the states, there's no way for us to be able to meet that demand. And really, that's not our responsibility, right? So this is one of the things that I'm very worried about. I'm also worried about all those women that don't have a choice, that won't have a choice, that cannot afford to travel, cannot afford the cost of travel, of staying in a hotel, and cannot afford the cost of paying for an abortion outside of their, here. And so and that's a lot of women. And those are the women that are going to be getting illegal abortions or going to drastic measures themselves because they're going to be left with no choices.
Local 4 News starts now with a breaking news alert.
The U.S. Supreme Court with a landmark decision overturning Roe v. Wade, which has stood for nearly 50 years.
Now, with Roe gone, let's be very clear. The health and life of women in this nation are now at risk.
Here in Michigan, the legal battle is still unfolding.
There's so much unknown, and that's precisely why our court needs to act.
Right now, abortion in Michigan is legal because a judge last month suspended a 1931 law that made it a crime.
But abortion opponents say the old law is valid and should stand. The ruling was a 6-3 split. The Supreme Court siding with a Mississippi law that bans almost all abortions after 15 weeks of pregnancy. The justices also struck down Roe v. Wade. That was a 5-4 split. As of now, abortion rights will be determined by the states themselves. Today's ruling comes more than a month after that stunning leak, you remember, of a draft opinion by Justice Samuel Alito indicating the court was prepared to take this step. Now take a look at this map that shows the status of abortion laws in every state.
13 states currently have what so-called trigger bans that will ban abortion within 30 days. 7 states are likely to ban abortion within weeks or months. In 21 states, abortion is likely to remain legal. Meanwhile, in 10 states, including the state of Michigan, the fate of abortion remains uncertain.
Better believe our Verify team has been hard at work. We've gotten so many questions from you about what's at stake when it comes to abortion rights in Georgia. Let's look at one viewer's question who asks, with Roe v. Wade overturned, can it be reinstated later? Our source for this is the Supreme Court of the United States. The court says its judgments are final. Decisions can only be changed by a constitutional amendment passed by Congress and ratified by the states, or a new ruling on a different case that comes before the court. We're answering more of your questions on 11alive.com. You can read through all of our special coverage. Ask a question yourself if you want. We also have expert analysis on what happens next on 11alive.com.
Well, could today's decision have a trickle-down effect on other landmark cases such as gay marriage?
Sherman Chow talked with former Houston Mayor Anise Parker and her wife about that question, which impacts their children as well.
In 2014, then Houston Mayor Anise Parker and Kathy Hubbard married.
I didn't know that it would be quite so meaningful.
A year later, the Overturned case meant their same-sex marriage would be legal across the country. The couple now fears that may be at risk because of the Supreme Court decision overturning abortion.
And do we need to move away from Texas?
CBS 2's Jenna DeAngelis now continuing our team coverage from a rally on the move, a march along Fifth Avenue. Jenna.
Well, Dana, it's very loud here. You can hear they are chanting "My body, my choice." The massive crowd has taken over Fifth Avenue at 8th Street. They marched from a rally in Union Square, and their goal is to head to Washington Square Park. Now, those behind the rally here are against the decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. We spoke to mothers, teenagers, and organizers here who say they refuse to stay silent. Several different groups of activists are here, from organization Radical Women to RiseUpForAbortionRights.org, which is holding similar rallies today in about a dozen other U.S. cities, including in D.C. at the Supreme Court. Here we spoke to abortion rights advocates, New Yorkers, who said they heard the news and had to act.
Angry because I've been demonstrating for abortion rights and reproductive justice since 1980.
It was devastating to learn that this is sort of like our future now and that we're going in a way backwards, but we're really just here to do something and change as much as we can.
This really sets the precedent that the Supreme Court can turn other minority rights like LGBTQ marriage, and slowly we see a domino effect happening in this country.
How do they have the right to do a law that the majority of people are against? There's no way this law will be obeyed, and so many people are going to be tied up in the legal system.
This is among several rallies expected tonight. Again, this crowd is in the middle of Fifth Avenue here, but their goal is to head to Washington Square. Earlier, President Biden called for peaceful protests, and so far that's what we're seeing here. We're live here. I'm Jenna DeAngelis, CBS 2 News.
Thank you, Jenna.
This is a live look at the federal building in downtown Dallas. Authorities have erected fences around the property and boarded up some windows. They're expecting protests to take place there.
Protests have been taking place all over the nation, from coast to coast, on both sides of this issue today. The case that triggered Roe being overturned is known as Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization. It's a Mississippi law that banned nearly all abortions after 15 weeks of pregnancy. President Biden addressed the nation today, denouncing the ruling this morning.
We need to restore the protections of Roe as law of the land. We need to elect officials who will do that. This fall, Roe is on the ballot. Personal freedoms are on the ballot. The right to privacy, liberty, equality, they're all on the ballot.
And as the president said earlier today, with your vote, you can act, and you have the final word. So this is not over.
A solid conservative majority voted 6-3 to uphold Mississippi's abortion restriction, including Justices John Roberts, Clarence Thomas, Sam Alito, Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett. 3 dissented, Justices Stephen Breyer, Sonia Sotomayor, and Elena Kagan. Chief Justice Roberts voted with the majority on Dobbs, but issued a separate opinion stating that he would not have overturned Roe. So the separate vote to actually overturn Roe v. Wade was slightly closer, a 5-4 decision. Justice Alito wrote the majority opinion in that case and was joined by Justices Thomas, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Barrett.
Now, state leaders celebrated the Supreme Court decision. Republican Governor Tate Reeves posted his reaction on social media this morning, saying, quote,
"Our elected officials were able to bring this case because of the conviction of our constituents. You see, Mississippi is a God-fearing place, and we fight this battle, a battle we've been fighting for almost 50 years, and we stand on the shoulders of so many who have come before us. But we fight this battle because we believe in our hearts that it's God's will to do so. To him be all the glory."
Lieutenant Governor Delbert Hosemann released this statement to the news meeting, quote, "The court's decision today returns the right to protect the unborn to the states. Mississippi is a leader on this critical issue with the law already in place which will prohibit abortion. I am pro-life. I am also pro-child. In addition to protecting the unborn, we must also focus on other ways to support women, children, and families."
And House Speaker Philip Gunn talked today on social media about forming a Speaker's Commission on Life. He says he will appoint House members and experts on policy, women's health, adoption, and child protection. They'll be charged with recommending next steps for life. Legislation to be ready for the next legislative session starting in January. He says they'll specifically work to improve child protection and foster care, make adoption more available and affordable, and boost child support enforcement.
WFAA has live team coverage of the ruling, starting with senior political reporter Jason Whiteley. So, Jason, what does it mean for Texans?
Well, Cynthia and Chris, both sides really have a lot planned right now, and Republicans tell us they are planning to further tighten abortion laws in the state. Texas Democrats say they hope today's landmark decision, as we just heard there a moment ago, they hope that drives people to go vote in November. You know, we expected this decision today. Remember, a draft of it was leaked last month, and today's ruling, all 213 pages of it, not that much different from that draft leak. So tonight, abortion is illegal in this state. Texas reverts back to laws that were on the books before the 1973 Roe decision from Scotia.